Not that against geocentrism or whatever other
So yeah, that includes no
non-geocentric
spinning either,
system.
right? So it's just geocentric, and there's a conspiracy to make us think that we're actually that stars aren't moving, and it's actually us moving. But yeah, so
Oh,
geocentrism, it's there's no rotation, right?
no, there could be. You can have a geocentric rotating Earth, but it's not moving. It's just rotating.
I don't really think that's workable, is it?
Well,
So
that's more workable
yeah.
than a stationary oblate spheroid because a stationary oblate spheroid, the verticals, let's say at 45 degrees latitude, they wouldn't be perpendicular to the surface on an oblate spheroid. But with a rotating spheroid, then you add the centrifugal forces and then they would. So you have
Is
Coriolis
the
and you have the
classic
centrifugal force on a rotating spheroid, and which I think makes it a better model than just a stationary globe.
because I think that well, I mean, not really because there's no like the idea that there's no movement is like the thing you get to like, oh great, okay, yeah, it makes sense we're not moving at all, right? That's what you get with geocentrism, because then giving that up would really relieve you, and like everything else you have to like try to say is happening that's not happening, like planes
Oh no,
not landing on it, all that kind of stuff.
geocentrism is simple that the Earth is in the center. Geocentrism itself doesn't necessarily need a stationary Earth. If you have a geocentric
I know
Earth
that,
that's
but I'm
spinning,
saying
that's
like,
still geocentric.
yeah, I know, but I'm saying if you're saying that one works better than the other, well, just the fact that we do not detect movement, planes wouldn't be able to land when they're going over a tangential gradient. They would have to be in perfect sync. All that kind of stuff would be like not a problem for you if it's just a stationary Earth.
But on a stationary Earth, then you have other problems. By the way, I don't think those problems you mentioned are actually problems. Um, but even if I grant you that they were, then you have other problems on a non-rotating Earth, because then you don't really have like a mechanism for stuff like Coriolis, the
What
changes in the.
Coriolis? That's a good. That's my point. There is no Coriolis, bro. Come on.
What about the pendulum?
Yeah, that's sidereal rotation. We have an ether.
Well, can you explain how that works?
I don't know exactly how it works, but it's picking up the sidereal rotation, whatever the transitive movement that's detected within the environment from whatever's moving the stars. That answers the question, whatever it is.
It doesn't affect plumb lines, but affect pendulums.
That doesn't seem to be strong enough for the. It has to be very sensitive equipment, I guess. But the pendulums, they have to be started anyway, right? I mean, you can see the 15-degree
Obviously,
rotation with the 3-ring laser gyro, which is extra sensitive.
yeah. You think on a spinning globe, you should expect pendulums to simply start on their own?
No, but I don't think they go forever anyway. They have to have motors and stuff like that. So if it was the movement of
And
the
no,
Earth, it would be perpetual. They would just keep.
pendulums wouldn't go forever in any type of Earth. The Earth doesn't have anything to do with pendulums stopping eventually. It has to do with the friction of the string and the air
Okay,
resistance.
well that's fine. Either way, we're as far as the 3-ring laser gyro and 15 degrees, all that could be chalked up to some type of force that we're unfamiliar with or have lost the knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're left with that kind of appeal. You have to appeal. Okay, there might be a mechanism that we don't know of, but if you have a rotating globe, that rotation itself already gives you all the mechanisms for all those effects.
Well,
That's
conveniently
why.
so, but then we're left with all of the fact that there's no movement. I mean, there's absolutely no movement. We're not freaking moving, and planes wouldn't be able to land. I'm not going to get into that right now, but
I disagree with that. And we talked about that many
well,
times
they
already.
would have to. Okay, so but yeah, the plane would have to be in perfect sync with the eastward rotation, right? To treat it as stationary, it would have to be in perfect sync, right?
Oh, a perfect sync would mean the airplane isn't moving at all relative to the surface. That's obviously not happening.
right?
As,
No, it has to be moving with the surface.
a plane is moving with the surface. It's
Yeah, right.
simply stationary
Eastward
for an observer.
at the exact same rate.
Think you're picturing a helicopter, not an airplane. An airplane is
No,
always
no,
moving across
no.
the
The
surface.
airplane has to be moving eastward with the exact same rate of the rotation as it's landing.
I think you're picturing a plane that is landing in the northwards or southwards direction.
Well, no, if it was landing and it
Is that what
wasn't
you're saying?
its tangential velocity wasn't the same as the tangential velocity of the rotation, it couldn't treat the Earth as stationary when it's landing. It's as simple as that, dude.
Oh,
And it could be
let's
landing
say
at any angle. It could be landing at
wait,
any angle, by the way.
no, no, I mean if the airplane is landing at the equator and it's landing from east to west, for example, it obviously is not going to be in sync with the velocity of the ground because it's flying, so it's by definition a different uh, velocity as the ground. It wouldn't be in sync. It shouldn't be in
Okay.
sync. Yeah, so it does
Okay. So
matter
how
the
does how
angle
does it
we're
get in
talking
sync
about.
then? How does it get in sync to land?
It only gets a completely in sync when it's stationary on the ground. When it fully broke, it fully stopped. That's when it's
So you're
actually in
saying
sync.
so then
Before
you're
that, it's
saying it
fine.
has to
It's
it
not
has to
100.
move with the eastward rotation as it's landing.
No, when the wheels of the airplane is on the ground, the airplane is still moving until it completely stops. So
Right, but I'm
when
talking
it
about
puts
just the
the wheels
eastward
on the
vector.
ground,
I'm not talking
mhm,
about the plane's vector. I'm not talking about the plane's vector. I'm talking about its eastward vector. It has to have a separate vector eastward with the rotation
that's why I
so that it can
said
land on the stationary ground
that's why
as
I
if it's
said
stationary.
you're probably picturing in north to south landing, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, in that case,
Okay.
sure. The airplane is
Yeah,
gonna have to be very closely
yeah.
the same east and west
No, not
velocity
very
as the ground.
closely. Exactly. Not very closely.
Not exactly.
Exactly.
If it's a
Yes,
centimeter
exactly.
per, if
If
it's a
it's going to treat
centimeter
the
per
Earth as
hour,
stationary, if it's going to treat the Earth
oh,
as stationary when it's landing, it has to be stationary relative to the Earth moving eastward.
I'm not sure if you have seen planes landing, but
Well, the wind is
it's
not
not
the
like a
same. If it's being
perfect.
blown by wind, if it's being blown
Okay,
by wind, that's one thing. If it's being blown by wind and having to land on a moving surface, that'd be two things.
okay. Obviously, it doesn't have to be a perfect sync uh, if it has a sideward velocity of let's say a centimeter per hour. That's obviously not gonna prevent the airplane from landing. That's not even gonna be noticeable. So it's a question of how much, right?
Well, the ground's not moving separately from the plane when the plane lands on it. Do you agree with that?
What do you mean moving separately? Moving is
Well, is
moving.
there any is
If
there
you're
any
moving,
kind of like variation? Oh wait, we gotta wait. We gotta catch up eastward with this rotation. We got to make the plane go sideways a little faster so that we can land on the Earth without breaking the wheels off. Is that ever an occurrence?
okay, so you're talking about when the airplane is not didn't get to that point yet. So let's say the airplane is still in the middle of the way. So its east and west velocity is not the same as where it's landing, right? That's
Yeah,
before it
it
gets
took off
there.
from a place where it had less tangential velocity. Somehow you're going to have to imagine that it has the same tangential velocity when it gets to the equator. It has an extra twice as fast sideways tangential velocity, which is impossible anyway. It doesn't happen on its own. It wouldn't happen on its own. The pilot's not taught to do it. So therefore, regardless of how that happens, even if your idea of the atmosphere doing it with the atmosphere acting on it like a wind, even though it's not a wind and the winds are blowing in opposite directions. None of that makes sense. So that's all contradiction and out the window. But even if there were a mechanism that you could name that makes the plane twice as fast sideways by the time it gets to the equator, it has to be continue moving in that vector eastward as it's slowing to a land in a perpendicular direction or some kind of various angle. Might even have to be going backwards and sideways at some various angle to keep up with the eastward rotation in a perfect one-to-one relationship so that it can always land on what we all know is a stationary ground. If the ground were moving ever slightly, even just slightly, we would be able to know that it's moving eastward at a different rate than the plane is moving eastward. Therefore, we know the fucking Earth isn't moving because planes land all the time, never have to worry about the ground moving even slightly eastward compared to their own eastward
Oh,
movement?
let
Because it's
me
not
answer
freaking moving.
your first claims before you get to a conclusion, because you said there has to be like a continuous mechanism. As a continuous mechanism, it's called the airplane is being piloted, right? It's being controlled by
So
someone
the
that is
so
trying
the
to follow a great circle
so the,
route.
okay, so the pilot's making it go backwards and sideways when it has to land at a weird angle so that it can
No,
keep up with the eastward rotation. Are you saying that's what's going on? Come on.
that's not what I said. Don't put words in my mouth. What the pilot is trying to do is it's trying to follow a great circle route. So it's trying to follow a certain path. When it's off the path,
Okay.
then it goes back to the path. It can get off the path because
Sure, Ken.
of a million things, because
No, it can get off the
turbines aren't
path.
working. The turbines aren't
It can
working
do whatever.
perfectly
It has to have it.
symmetrically.
There's a storm that could be off the path. Lots of times it could be off the path. Before there was
Yeah,
any kind of path to follow, they just flew wherever they wanted and landed on the Earth like it was stationary. Path doesn't do it.
yeah, they don't randomly pick a direction and go without ever checking if they're still going that direction. They have to continuously
Sure.
check if they're not drifting away. And there are many
Continuously
things
check
that
for what? Continuously
yeah,
check for the movement of the Earth compared to their own movement eastward. Do they ever check for
that's
that?
not what I said.
But what do
No,
they?
you
What do
don't
you
have
mean? They
to
can
ask.
fly wherever they
You
want.
don't.
They don't have to have a
Please let me
path.
answer your questions. You don't have to check for individual causes that affect the path of an airplane. You don't have to check every time if the engines have this exact same thrust in both sides. You don't have to check if there's zero wind sideways compared to the velocity of the airplane. You don't have to keep checking for every single individual effect of the airplane. You simply check if the airplane is going in the right direction, it's in the right place. And if it's not, then you correct for that. Whatever it is that's causing that. There's a number of factors applying to the airplane simultaneously. And if you work out the deviation you would expect from the change in east and west velocity of the Earth's motion, uh,
Is that ever anything they check for? Is that something they ever check for? Like making sure that their eastward tangential velocity is close enough, or in my opinion, the exact same rate as the Earth's rotation? Is that something they ever check for? I don't know. Did I cut out? Did he cut out? What happened?
Yeah, it's just quiet for a second. Maybe he lost connection. Has anyone ever responded with that autopilot just automatically does it? Has anyone ever said
They've
that?
tried. They've tried, but we didn't have autopilot when people were just flying wherever they want before any of that.
Right.
It wouldn't work anyway because whatever the mechanism is, like if you're going west southwest, that means the autopilot would have some way of making the plane go backwards and sideways as it's landing to keep up with the rotation of the Earth. It doesn't make the plane's not even made to do that. Even if the pilot were aware that he'd need to do that, or that the autopilot was somehow, he would have to, like, if it was sideways, eastward, if eastward was sideways to the north facing ramp, they'd have to have jets on the side of the plane to keep it up with the Earth as they're landing. I mean, the design of the plane would be completely different if it was spinning.
Oh, why? I find this interesting because even if you assume that the Earth is a sphere and the air is moving with the Earth, there's more than enough drag by the wind to cause the plane to keep up with the Earth more or less, right? That if you're
Well,
going from north to south, you've only got to pick up a fraction of a meter per second of acceleration, and that's about the terminal velocity of a plane going sideways. It's easy to get
um,
dragged along by the wind.
you may not have understood my previous point, but the winds aren't what keeps the plane moving with eastward rotation, even theoretically. But I mean, you could say winds, and then we'll have to talk about the winds that are like overpowering the other winds going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, but in general, right, the air is moving with the Earth on average.
Well, average on average and in general are not things you want to tell a pilot when you're talking about a safe landing. It has to be precise.
Yeah,
It has to be exactly what's happening. It can't just be like, oh, in general, we're thinking the air is going to move you in pretty much the same rotation as the Earth. So when you land, you should be just about the same eastward velocity. Now, if you weren't, it'd be a big problem because your wheels are going to break off and you're going to crash the plane. But we're just going to trust in this air that's making it close to a one-to-one relationship when you're landing the plane, which you always just assume is going to be stationary. But we're just going to put our faith in these winds to make you go backwards and sideways. Think about it as if you're going west-southwest, right? Think about that, west-southwest. Now you're going
Yep.
against the rotation, and you're going to the equator, where you need twice as fast eastward rotation, right? So now you're going to have to correct backwards and sideways to go directly eastward twice as fast. How's that
Well,
happening?
you're not
Yeah.
teleporting.
No, yeah, and you're not being lobbed as a projectile, and it's happening very slowly. So at no time is there any difference, any large differential velocity between you and the surface of the Earth. The pilot is maintaining that constant flight velocity across the surface.
Well, that's the assumption. That's just a concept that you're just going to say at no time there's going to be a problem. Let me just ask you this. Could there be a problem? Could the pilot create the problem on purpose? Could he get in one of those jets that flies 1,000 miles an hour and hovers in midair with 40,000 pounds of thrust resistance? Could he get in one of those jets and then make sure he's not in perfect sync with the eastward rotation? Would that be
The
possible?
wind would blow him in that case. He'd move with the air because so you're talking about like one of those jets that can hover ballistically or whatever they call it on its own thrust.
Yeah,
Like a helicopter.
fly at the same
Yeah.
speed as the Earth supposedly spins. You're saying the wind
Oh,
is
okay.
going to like still blow him into the one.
His speed.
Even though wind's blow in all directions, you're going to say the wind still just blows in one direction predominantly and is going to overcome the 1,000 miles an hour jet that has 40,000 pounds of thrust resistance and it's going to be perfectly overriding the winds that are variable. And then it's going to make this one-to-one relationship somehow. This wind, where's this wind? What's this wind called?
So there's always you've got the Earth moving, you've got the wind moving relative to the Earth, then you've got the aircraft moving relative to the wind, right? So the aircraft can only go a certain speed relative to the air around it, otherwise it'll go into structural failure, right? So it's got a maximum speed compared to the wind. The wind has a maximum speed compared to the ground. The whole lot's kind of hung together by those maximums, which means the aircraft can never get beyond the ground speed more than the wind speed plus its velocity, right? So that's why the aircraft is always able to be approximately at the ground speed when it comes to land, because it's never exceeding that relative speed by more than that combined slip difference between the two.
I'm sorry, somebody was just talking to me.
But how wouldn't you be able to detect any speed differences? And wouldn't there be a critical mass or a critical worst case scenario where the rotation of the Earth, the layout of the airport, the wind are all heading in some direction, and that is called some catastrophe for we can't land?
No, because the aircraft is never going more than its flight envelope faster than the ground speed, right? So, or faster than the airspeed, which means that it can never be going more than what it can fly plus the wind, which means it's always got the ability to slow down and land.
New perspective. This is your kind of
Yeah, I'm
cutthroat.
sorry. I'm busy for a second. I'll be right back.
All right, man.
All right. So what did you say? Okay. So the plane's taking off with a conserved momentum of 500 miles an hour eastward, and then it goes
Yeah,
west
no, we don't.
southwest where it needs to be going 1,000 miles an hour eastward. How does it gain the 500 by the time it gets there, and it's only going west southwest? How does it go backwards and sideways twice as fast by the time it gets there?
Yeah. So the conservation of momentum is one thing, right? But we don't have to worry about what the momentum looks like from the outside. We only have to worry about what the momentum looks like from the Earth's perspective. And that is controlled by our flight. Our engines and our wings determine what our momentum relative to the ground is. And that's kind of
Also,
limited,
the
right?
wait, is there a gauge? Is there a gauge that says, okay, starting off going 500 miles per hour in the eastward vector, and then there's going to be a gauge that tells the pilot that he's okay to land the plane because this gauge is telling him that he's now moving eastward at the exact same rate as the rotation of the Earth. Is that what you're saying? The planes are made to do this, or I don't get what you're
No. It's quite easy to tell if you've got the same rotation as the Earth. And what would if you
Oh,
were
how
to,
do you do that? How do you do that?
because you look out the window and you see that the Earth
Oh,
is
you look out
traveling
the
at the
window.
same speed as you, right? You're coming into land. The instrument
Do
landing says you're coming in. Yeah.
you think pilots ever look out the window to make sure they're going eastward at the same rotation of the Earth?
They don't
Do you
know
think
they're
that ever
going
happens?
eastward. Everything is moving eastward together, right?
That's the
They're not
concept. It's just
aware at
wait,
all.
Dazza, that's just the concept. It's just a concept.
It's not.
It could be either stationary or you could think about it going eastward at the exact same rate. But it's just a concept. Either way, if it's stationary, it works just fine, right? You look out the window, the
Okay.
ground's stationary relative to your movement. And if you're going eastward at the exact same rate, you can look out your window and you see that the ground's stationary relative to your movement. It would look exactly the same. So you only know that it's
Yeah.
going eastward because you think of it that way, not because there's any evidence that that's happening whatsoever.
Well, that's it. You cannot use this to determine whether the Earth is moving or not, because all of those things get lost in wind resistance, gusts, drag adjustments. It's the aircraft
Not
is
true.
not sensitive enough.
No, you would know. You would know. Like the scenario we went through the other day, where you made it worse on yourself by saying that the plane's going from the North Pole to the equator. And you said, well, by the time he gets there, he's not going to even know that he's accelerated twice to 1,000 miles an hour eastward. And it only had a 400 mile per hour cruising speed. So you're saying this plane takes off from the North Pole, stays at a 400 mile per hour cruising speed all the way to the equator, and somehow this plane is just going to be moving 1,000 miles an hour sideways, and the pilot
Yeah.
would have no idea that that's going on. That's just a concept. That's obviously not the case. So the pilot would know if he's going 1,000 miles an hour faster sideways.
How?
That's ridiculous. I don't even think that's
How would he
possible.
know? How would he know? If the
So he's
air
only
was
going
moving
400
with
miles
him
an
and the
hour to
ground was
begin with.
moving with him.
He never, because he only accelerated to 400 miles per hour to begin with.
Okay. Now, what
Yeah.
stops the plane going faster than 400 miles an hour?
The design of the plane, all those.
Yeah, wind resistance, right? Basically.
Well, no, I mean, some planes are like made to actually like take the acceleration speeds up to a certain flight. A lot of them would break apart if they went that fast, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Because the aerodynamics characteristics versus their thrust means they can't go any faster, and so that's their maximum airspeed that they're able to attain, right?
Wait, Dazza, come on, just be real. Don't you think that that's ridiculous to even think that the guy would be going 1,000 miles an hour faster than when he started from? And the plane's not even made to go that fast. That he'd be going sideways that fast, but then somehow maintain a 400 mile per hour forward vector and just think that's the only thing that's going on? That is ridiculous and not even possible.
We talked about the acceleration the other day, right? It's something like 0.02 meters per second, about 1/100th of a g, something like that. That's the acceleration required over that duration of flight to go from nothing to 1,000 kilometers an hour, as seen by someone from outside the Earth with the Earth spinning.
Just thinking of it incrementally to make it seem like a smaller amount doesn't take away from the ludicrousness of it. It still has to be
But it
1,000
does.
miles an hour sideways faster. Well, it does for you.
No incredulity.
It's not incredulity. It's impossibility we're talking about here, guys.
Yeah, but
Impossibility.
just-
Not going
I
to be
just
moving 1,000 miles an
justification
hour
for it being
sideways.
impossible.
And full circle, we still have to say, what's the mechanism that's keeping him go that exact extra 1,000 miles an hour sideways as it's coming to a land?
That was already answered.
No, it wasn't
There's a
answered. It
pilot
wasn't
trying.
answered. I don't know. You cut out. What's
I
the
just-
mechanism that's keeping him moving exactly at the same rate so that he can
Can I add
assume
a
that the
very important point, brothers? Can I add a very important point? Bruno Gillison, an astronomy aficionado, airline pilot gazing at the stars on night flights, answers on Quora do pilots have to account for the Earth's rotation? And his answer is, most pilots have no idea what that question entails, so that alone should answer it. They don't account for it.
Yeah, we are
But
all
let's
on board with that. No
exactly.
one's disagreeing with that.
No, but you are, because he's
No,
pointing
I'm
out
not.
the fact that the Earth's rotation is not accounted for when you are landing a plane.
Yeah, so if you're listening to the conversation, our response is not that it is accounted for. We're explaining why you don't have to. So you stating that doesn't actually add to the conversation because we already agree with that. They don't have to account for Coriolis. We all agree with that.
So either there's no Coriolis, which makes the most sense, or there's Coriolis with some kind of explanation of him not realizing that he's accounting for it, but not trying.
Which is the one that does make sense, but we can't get you to acknowledge
That
that.
makes no sense, obviously. Just
I
be
know it
objective
doesn't
about
make
that.
sense to you, but
It's not about now making sense to me. Talking about objectively, that is ridiculous.
while we're in the middle of the discussion, don't declare that your position is the one that makes objective sense. We can do the same
Well,
thing.
you have to then name the mechanism that keeps the plane in perfect rotation with the Earth as it's slowing to a land in some angle at a different direction.
We told you it's called the pilot is trying to follow a great circle route when it's flying the airplane.
No, oh, you must have
It
cut
has the
out because
course it's
my
trying to
retort
follow.
to that earlier. I think maybe your audio cut out, but that means the pilot would have to make sure that the plane can fly backwards and sideways as he's trying to land forwards. Because it
I
could be
will
an
reply
angle
to
that's
that
at
already.
the angle to the eastward rotation could be backwards and sideways. In fact, if he's going west southwest, he'd be backwards and sideways to the eastward rotation the whole flight.
No, I will reply to that already. The pilot doesn't have to try to correct for individually everything that affects the flight. It only has to account for the overall effect of everything that is affecting the flight, which is simply trying to stay on his course.
Yeah, but I already retorted that. They can get off course. They can fly wherever they want before any of this course idea, before any of the autopilot idea, before the planes were even made to do any of this. They could just fly wherever they want. They can fly all the way to the equator, fly all around the world, land on the surface like a stationary. They never have to worry about the eastward rotation. The planes wouldn't be able to even move backwards and sideways literally by their own design. So it is ludicrous. That's why I'm calling it objectively, ridiculously impossible.
No, pointing out that you can't, like, you can allow the airplane to be affected by wind and uneven thrust of the engines, for example. That doesn't immediately then makes Coriolis noticeable because all the effects are added up together to the airplane. You don't have a single one. It's like if you can go whatever you want, then you can see all those effects separately. That just doesn't follow.
Vector mass doesn't help you here either. Just putting them all in one equation and thinking about them as one movement doesn't make them like one movement.
Oh, the airplane is just one thing. So if it deviates as a summation of every effect that is affecting it. It can't go to the right and to the left at the same time. If you have something that makes it go to the right and something that makes it go to the left, you don't have those two things happening in a way that is distinguishable. All you have is the summation of those effects.
Well, yeah, but you can think about it a lot easier that way if you're just thinking about a course in like the airplane in the air. But when it comes to the land, it would have to worry about keeping up with the eastward rotation as well as winds, right? Now the winds are moving him relative to the ground, and the ground is moving relative to him. That's two things, not one.
I know. So
Doesn't matter if you think about it as one, it's two things. And he never has to
no,
worry about the other thing.
I'm not thinking the air and the ground as one. I'm saying that all the effects that affect the airplane, they affect the airplane together. You don't see them separately. So
Well,
you
you
can't
would if the
distinguish
Earth were
between
moving.
Coriolis and
No,
wind and the aerodynamics of the airplane.
yes, you can. Yes, you absolutely can. When you're landing the plane, you're going to know if you're landing on a moving surface and you have to keep up with that surface, as well as deal with the winds that are pushing you off your alignment from that moving surface. You would know that you have a moving surface that you're trying to catch up to, and you have winds pushing you the opposite direction of that moving surface. So you have to even overcompensate somehow backwards and sideways, which the plane's not even made to do. It wouldn't
Oh,
work.
how you can distinguish between how much is the wind affecting your airplane and how much is Coriolis affecting your airplane if you only have all the effects combined affecting your airplane.
Well, no. We just established there's two separate things happening. It's not about thinking of them as one combined thing. You were trying to land on a surface that's moving eastward at a certain rotation, and you're trying to make sure you're lined up with that. You have to make sure the plane's moving at the exact same rate in that eastward rotation, right? It has to be moving exactly the same rate. But now you have all these winds messing you up from being at that rate. So now you have winds blowing you off your alignment from this moving surface, and now you're overpowering. No, maybe the wind's blowing you too much. No, this wind's blowing me way too much, and the surface keeps moving. Every time I get lined up with it, the surface just keeps moving eastward. And now the winds, there's no winds, and there's no winds at all, and the surface is still moving eastward. Shit, I just compensated for the winds, and now there's no wind. And I was hoping that wind would keep me up with that surface so that I can land on it and just assume to treat it as stationary. These are the kind of problems that pilots would deal with all of the time if the Earth were moving, dude.
Are you saying you believe a pilot could match the wind just right, so the only effect on the airplane it would be Coriolis? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm saying that the pilot
Oh, if
only
that's not the case, then
I'm saying
what are
the
you even
only
arguing?
possible way. I'm saying the only possible way that the pilot could assume to treat the Earth as stationary wherever he goes, without ground pass, without any of that, right? The only way he can always assume to treat it as stationary is if it's actually stationary. Otherwise, these are the kind of problems he would have to deal with. Objective.
You're not actually presenting a case that concludes that. Now you're just stating it.
You don't get that he would have to be in perfect sync with the eastward rotation?
No, I explained you why there is more than one thing happening with the airplane at the same time. Like you never is,
Well, let's take
you
it.
never
Let's
are.
take it one at a time. Let's take it one at a time. So that
So
you're
the pilot
in agreement
can't do
for the
that.
pilot to treat the runway stationary. The plane has to be moving in a one-to-one relationship with the eastward rotation. Yes or no?
Say that again.
For the pilot to treat any runway as if it's stationary, at any angle, anywhere, the plane would have to be moving in a one-to-one relationship with the eastward rotation of the surface.
What do you mean a one-on-one relationship?
Meaning that
Is
it
there
has to
another
be
way to say
so
perfect sync?
unrecognizably the same that he could just assume that the Earth is stationary when he's landing the plane on it, so he never has to worry about the wheels breaking off. That's
It's not an
how
assumption
one-to-one I
that the
think.
Earth is stationary. That's an assumption that the Earth and the airplane has the same tangential velocity in the east-west direction.
That's what I'm asking, right? So your agreement is that the plane needs to be moving in the exact same eastward tangential velocity as the surface of the Earth, so that the pilot can land the plane on the surface as if it's stationary.
Yeah, assuming
Yes or no?
assuming a
Yes.
land a north to
Okay.
south landing.
So we got one thing, right? That's one separate
Mhm.
thing from everything else he has to deal with. So how is the pilot, when he's at an angle that's going to make him have to go backwards and sideways with that eastward rotation, going to make the plane go backwards and sideways to keep up with the eastward
What
rotation?
do you
How does
mean
the pilot do
backwards and
that? How
sideways?
does the plane do
Why
that?
would the
How does
airplane
the
have to go
atmosphere do that?
backwards? What do you mean have to
Because
go
the
backwards?
angle of the runway is causing the plane to have to move with the rotation backwards and sideways because it's
Why
a
backwards?
west-southwest facing runway.
Okay, why is it backwards, not just sideways?
Because if the runway is facing west-southwest at an angle to the rotation, right, then it's going to be
Well,
backwards and
let's talk about
sideways to
one
the rotation.
scenario at a time.
This is
Let's
what we're
talk about
talking about. This is the scenario. This is the scenario we're talking about right now.
the scenario
Would the
was a
plane
north
have
to
to be
south
going
landing.
backwards and sideways? Oh, why are you trying to run away from this?
I'm not trying to
West-southwest
run. I'm trying to
facing runway.
understand if you're picturing a
Do
north to
you
south.
agree? I'm saying
Please,
west-southwest. The
I'm just asking
angle of
for
the runway is
clarification.
west-southwest. We're dealing with that scenario. The angle of the runway is west-southwest. That
Let me
means
just
the
ask for
plane would have to be
clarification.
going to keep up with the eastward rotation. The plane would have to be going backwards and sideways to keep up with the rotation because the
Okay,
angle that it's
new
landing
perspective.
on the surface with west-southwest.
New perspective. I'm not a mind reader, so if I'm confused about what you're picturing, I have to ask you: are you picturing a north to south landing or a east and west landing when you ask me that question?
A west-southwest facing runway. It's at an angle
West,
west-southwest. You
southwest,
understand that?
at like a 45.
West-southwest. It's at an angle. 45-degree angle to the equator, let's say. And it only had a
45
tangential
degree.
velocity of 500. Now it needs to be going twice as fast backwards and sideways. How is the plane? The planes aren't designed to do that, so that's why I'm saying it actually is
Okay,
objectively
so I
impossible.
disagree with the first question because when you asked me if it has to have the same east and west direction, the same tangential direction, I said yes because I
Yeah.
was picturing it north to south landing, which you
Okay.
agreed to.
But why would it be
In that
different?
case, it wouldn't, because it's no longer the same east and west velocity. If the airplane is landing on an angle, not an north
Yeah.
to south,
Runways are always faced wherever.
it has a east velocity and it has a south velocity. So none of those
Oh
are going
yeah,
to be in
there's two
sync with
vectors. Yeah. So
yes,
how would a
none of
west
those are going to
southwest
be in
runway
sync.
work? Because we know that happens. They just put the runways wherever it makes sense to. They don't worry about the rotation when they make the runways, which is a big clue, by the way.
The airplane is going to have a larger velocity in the east and in the south direction as well. So none of those are going to be in sync, regardless on the Earth spinning or not. Even on a stationary Earth, that would be the case. So that doesn't have anything to do with the rotation.
Oh no, you're lost. Hold on. Where are the crackers?
Mhm. That's why I've tried to bring you to the north and south landing, north to south landing.
All right, so you're admitting that it wouldn't be at work. It wouldn't work with the west southwest because the plane would have to be going
No,
backwards and
that's not what I'm
sideways.
saying.
Well, then why
That's
are
not
you
what I'm
running away
saying.
from that? Why are you trying to change it?
I'm not
That's my
running away
scenario.
from that. I'm pointing out the
That's what I meant
confusion on
by
what you're
west
saying.
southwest. What do you mean confusion?
Yeah, because at the beginning you agree we were talking about north to south landing,
Well, what's the
and
problem with it
and
being
then you
west southwest?
mentioned the airplane having to go backwards, and that confused me.
Yeah,
Now I realize you were
that's why
not
I'm
actually
telling you
talking.
because it would be well because it's a
Wait,
west southwest facing runway makes it backwards and sideways. I was explaining myself. Now you can't
okay,
explain how
that
it would
does,
do that,
but
so that makes sense,
that
right?
didn't make sense. So can we deal with the north to south landing first, which is the simpler scenario, and then we go to
But wait
the
a
more
minute,
complicated
we
scenario where it's
can.
going
It's
diagonally.
just as bad for you. But why is it that west southwest presents such a problem? Do you at least know what I meant by backwards and sideways now?
I don't know what you mean by backwards and sideways, but we have to agree on one
Well,
direction
because like
first.
if
Are we
it's
doing north to south or are we doing 45 degrees diagonally?
well, it doesn't really
This
matter.
is
But
like a discussion happening in the cockpit while the pilots are trying to figure out how the fuck to land.
hey, can we just do this north to south runway thing? Because I don't like the way that one's angled. I don't know about going backwards and sideways. I might not be in sync with the rotation of the Earth, and we might have problems. Can we just could you change the runway direction for me for just the means of discussion and for our safety? It wouldn't work anyway. You understand what
That's
I'm
very
saying? If
funny.
it was west southwest, right? If the plane is flying in a west southwest direction, Bacon, that means it would have to gain twice as fast. If it starts with a 500-mile-per-hour conserved momentum, it would have to be going twice as fast backwards and sideways to keep up with the rotation. If it goes to the
What do
equator
you
with 1,000
mean
miles an hour,
backwards?
huh?
What do you mean have to go faster backwards?
Because if it was
There's no
going against
backward
the
motion.
spin, it's going against the spin, right? And it's going south. So it's west against the spin and headed towards the equator where the
Okay, let
tangential
me draw it
velocity
out.
doubles. So
Give me a
it's
second.
doubled the tangential velocity, right? Because he only started with
Let,
500. Now he needs
just a
1,000
second.
by the
Just
time he
a
gets
second.
to the equator, and he's angled, right? So that's a backwards and sideways movement that he'd have to gain somehow twice the acceleration and then even if that were possible, even if the plane were, oh,
Yeah, I can't focus right now. Just give me a second.
doesn't seem like that hard a problem for a smart guy.
Okay, I'll share my screen and let me try to draw what you're saying, and then you confirm if I'm following. Because it seems that you're changing the scenario like at least twice already. Can you join my live stream?
There's only one direction of the Earth spin, so he's referencing that direction to the direction of the landing and the landing strip.
Yeah, but he changed the direction of the landing after asking me a question that only applied to the first direction. So when the direction was southwards, north to south, he asked me if the airplane would have to sync with the east and west velocity of the how do you call it, the thing where the airplane lands?
The landing strip.
Yeah, landing strip. That's the name. Landing strip.
There's probably other names, but that's one that I know for sure.
Okay, okay. So you would have to sync the east and west motion with the landing strip when it's going northwards, landing north to south. That's not the case if it's going diagonally. So the question that I answered doesn't actually apply to the scenario where it's going diagonally. So he changed it after I answered the question to a different scenario. Okay,
I
so
only changed it because you were asking me why I would have to go backwards and sideways. Then I gave you an example that perfectly explains that. Now you're having a
so it doesn't have to go backwards and sideways when it's landing north to south, you're saying?
no. It would just be eastward still, sideways.
Okay, can we talk about that scenario first?
I just think it's funny that west southwest does fuck you up,
It
but it doesn't
doesn't fuck
matter.
me up.
Eastward, going
It's not that
sideways would
that
be probably.
specific scenario.
We can change it. We can go back to north to south. I know it's impossible to do the other one, but this one's
No,
impossible too.
let's do the other. Let's do the impossible one. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Just tell me which one we're talking about. It's not that that specific one has a problem. The problem is simply that you changed in the middle of it.
Either way, how is the plane keeping up with the rotation? That's the actual question.
Okay, it's not.
Okay, that settles that. So,
Yeah, you
any
only
other?
be completely in sync with the surface when it's completely landed. After it completely stops on the ground. That's when it's actually in sync with the surface. At any other point, it has a different velocity than the surface because it's still moving across the surface.
Well, but that's my point. It would have to keep up with the rotation
That
as
doesn't
it's
have anything to
slowing
do with the
down to come to
rotation.
that land. No, I'm saying the
That's
plane
the
would have to
same.
be in the eastward. It would have to stay with the rotation perfectly, so that it could just assume the Earth is stationary when it's landing.
You know, what I said is exactly the same on a stationary Earth and a rotating Earth. That doesn't have anything to do with rotation. Okay, so
I don't even know what you're
can
saying
you
now. What did you say? Yeah, so it's only It's only in perfect sync when it's on the ground. I agree. It would be
can you
only in
join the live
perfect
stream?
sync. What?
Can you join my live stream?
Oh, sure.
I'm drawing the thing, the airplane and the landing strip and the directions on north, south, and east and west. So so I can make sure I'm following what you're saying, and you're following what I'm saying too. Yeah, what do you think about my airplane, Jesse?
That's real nice.
Thank you.
Too bad it's gonna crash if it tries to land on a movie.
Is that the scenario you're describing when you say east, southwest, something like that? Northeast, southwest, is that the direction we're
Yeah,
going?
it's west southwest. Yeah, it's
Wait,
going west
west,
southwest. Good. That's good enough.
southwest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
West
going
is
at
not
an
opposite
angle.
of southwest. That's not make sense to me. If you
Well, if
mean
it's an
northeast,
eastward
southwest,
rotation,
then
well, if the eastward rotation is coming from the North Pole, right, and it has to go to the equator, right, where it needs to be 1,000 miles an hour in perfect tangential velocity sync with Earth's rotation.
yeah,
How's it
forget the
gonna go
rotation for a
sideways?
second. I'm simply trying to understand where to place the airplane here in my drawing. Can you draw my live stream and confirm that I did it correctly? I just want to
Yeah,
make
that works.
sure I'm
That's fine.
picturing what you're trying to say.
That's the concept, bro. You got it.
I don't think you're in my live stream.
Now draw arrows. Now draw. I am. Yeah, I'm looking right at it.
Oh, okay, yeah, you
Draw
are.
the
Sorry.
arrows. Draw the arrows pointing directly east with the
Directly
globe behind.
east.
Yeah, it's the
Well,
eastward
what does that
rotation,
represent?
right? The rotation of the supposed rotation of the Earth eastward.
Okay, that's the velocity of the Earth. Okay.
Okay, so then it
The airplane will have a smaller velocity on
starts
the
with
east
500
direction.
mile per hour. Starts with a 500 mile per hour tangential velocity, so we can let you beg the question with that conserve momentum all the way to the equator. It's moving 500 miles per
Oh, it's
hour
about to
with the
land.
rotation. Huh?
No, it's about to land. It doesn't have 500 miles an
Sure.
hour.
Okay. Okay. What does it have? How fast is it moving eastward?
How fast does an airplane land?
No, I'm asking
What's the
how fast
average
is the
velocity?
ground moving? How fast is the ground moving eastward compared to the plane's movement eastward?
Well, the ground is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, so let me put this here.
Okay.
1,000.
All right.
That's the velocity
So
of the
how
ground.
fast is the plane
Now,
moving? How fast is the plane moving eastward now?
yeah, that's why I asked the question. How fast airplanes are when they're landing, usually, so I can give you an answer.
250
Well,
miles an hour.
they slow down from 400 to zero.
Someone gave me the answer, but I couldn't hear. What was that?
Jesse said 250.
250? Okay, so 250 divided by the square root of 2, and that's 1,000 minus that. Okay, so the velocity of the airplane is in this direction is 823 miles per hour when it's landing.
All right. It's not 1,000, so you still have a problem. But how did you get that number?
What I just said, I divided by the square root of 2 and I subtracted from 1,000.
Why did you do that?
Because that would be the eastwards velocity of the airplane when it's landing.
How do you know that it'd be moving eastward that amount? I mean, it's only going 400 miles an hour cruising speed forward. It only went up to 400 miles an hour. How's it going 800
Yeah,
miles an hour sideways?
that velocity is relative to the landing strip. So relative to the
No, but
landing strip, that would be the velocity.
well, how would the plane gain any kind of acceleration because it's relative to something?
Oh, it has thrusts. They
Well, that's what I'm
accelerate the
saying.
airplane.
How is it thrusting backwards and sideways?
They're not working backwards and sideways. They work in the direction that the airplane is aiming at.
Yeah, only forward, right? So how is it going east if it's only going west southwest?
The plane doesn't go perfectly forward the whole way. It slightly turns left and right in its course, correcting for it
Sure,
not being on the right course. When it
and
does
that's
that,
why.
when it makes any curve to the right or the left, then the acceleration is no longer just forward.
Yeah, it could be curving left and right the whole time. That makes sense, sure. But you're not
Yeah,
saying that it's going to be moving. It's going to be moving eastward 800 miles an hour just because it curves a little bit one direction or the other as it's going.
oh, it does that multiple times during its course.
Yeah, but it doesn't do that to make the plane accelerate 800 miles an hour when it was only going 400 forward. It's not going to accelerate the plane to go
How do
twice
you
as
know
fast
for
as
how
its
long it
forward
flies?
acceleration. Well, why would what evidence do we have that ever happens? Like, why would that happen? How could it happen? The plane's not even made to go that fast. What's causing
It's
it? What's the mechanism? Wait, what's the mechanism that makes this? Or you can just keep going. I mean, if you believe that, it's still not in sync with 1,000 miles an hour, so it still doesn't work. But it wouldn't be going 800 miles an hour sideways. Why would it be doing that?
that would be the velocity of the airplane when it's landing at that point after all of its course.
Where are you getting that from? If the plane's going 800 miles an hour sideways, the pilot would be aware that that's happening. He would make it do that if it could do that, but it can't. It can't
Oh,
even do that, and the pilot's not even making it do that.
no,
Ground path doesn't help.
please, this 823 miles per hour, that would be on an inertial plane, on a plane that is not rotating with the Earth. The pilot doesn't have access to that. If you want to know the ground velocity of the airplane in that direction, it would be 177 miles per hour, not 823. I'm using the same frame where the same reference frame where the surface is moving 1,000 miles an hour. In that reference frame, then the airplane is going eastwards 823 miles. But the
But that's
the
not. But
pilot
that's
doesn't have access to that reference
almost
frame.
200 miles an hour. It's going to be almost 200 miles per hour slower than the eastward rotation, even with that.
Exactly, it's 177
So when
miles
it
per hour
lands,
difference.
the surface is going to be moving and break the wheels off and crash the plane.
No, because if you add that velocity, which is 177 in that direction, to this velocity, which is 177 in this direction, you get a diagonal velocity of 200 miles per hour, which is the velocity in which the airplane is going to land. And it's going to land in the same direction of the landing strip, which is 45 degrees here.
Wait, 823, and then you're getting 177 what?
It's 177 in this direction. It's 823
Downwards?
in that direction.
Downwards? Wait, what's that direction? Downwards or south?
Southwards. Southwards. 177
Oh,
miles per hour southwards.
wait, how's that? How is that even possible? How's it going 823 miles an hour eastward and 177 miles an hour southward? And it also has a west-southwest vector. How is any of that possible?
Well, I
That's ridiculous.
decompose the
It's
velocity.
mathematical jargon that doesn't
No,
have anything to do
no,
with reality.
that's actually
It's
high
so
school.
funny.
Literally high school math. You decompose the velocity into vectors when you have axes that are parallel to each other, like the north-south axis and the east-west axis. Those are parallel to each other, so you can decompose the velocity of the airplane into axes. One is the east and west velocity, and the other is the north-south velocity. This is very basic math. This is not math jargon.
Kinematics. Oh, but see, the kinematics and the dynamics are two different things here, bro.
You are not talking about specifically the dynamics or the kinematics. I'm just answering you what are the velocities
Mm,
here.
no. The kinematics are the mathematical thing that you're saying would make it in sync with the
Oh,
Earth. You have to
you're
explain how it would
asking.
be even if you're saying the plane's going 823 miles an hour sideways eastward with the rotation. You have to explain how that happened and what the mechanism is that's making that happen. That's
It's
all
not
I'm
going
talking
with
about.
the rotation. The rotation is 1,000 miles per hour. The airplane is just 123 miles per hour.
Sure.
It's simply slower than the surface by
You have
177
to
miles.
explain where the A23 came from. It only had a 400 mile per hour cruise.
Well, it came from the velocity the airplane had when it started flying, plus every acceleration it was subject to.
No, it didn't because it only had 500 to begin with, and it's accelerating in all directions to compensate for wind. So it's not having anything to do with accelerating in one direction only.
It has to accelerate in multiple directions to keep on its course. So it flies for a couple hours. During those couple hours, it has a bunch of acceleration and a bunch of different velocities. You have to add those up to end up with a final velocity. Did I lose connection again?
No, you're loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, I'm at a store. I'm checking out. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, so you're one of the people that thinks that the airplane and the pilot do all the acceleration. It's not the atmosphere that's blowing it in that direction to make up the difference, right? You don't think that at all?
That's what I said. The atmosphere, the interaction between the airplane and the atmosphere also is a source of acceleration to the airplane.
I'm sorry, I'm out of the store now. What's that? What's accelerating it twice as fast sideways perfectly?
Okay, the interaction between the airplane and the atmosphere, that's
Yeah.
also a source of acceleration to the airplane.
Also, we got a couple variables.
You have more than one thing that accelerates the airplane. One of them is
Oh
the
yeah,
interaction between the airplane and the
because if it was a
atmosphere.
lot of
Another one.
so how is it that the atmosphere would be accelerating it in one direction even though the wind's going all directions? Let's get that taken care of.
I didn't say it's in one direction. The interaction
Oh, okay,
between the airplane and the
so it's not
atmosphere
helping the
has.
plane. So the atmosphere is not helping the plane necessarily at all. It could just be the wind blowing westward the whole time, right?
it's not helping necessarily. It's just doing
Okay,
whatever
good.
it's doing depending on the wind velocity, the aerodynamics of the airplane.
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with that. Now, if this plane's off course, right?
It has
So
to do with
it's just
that.
looking. It's just looking for some. No, it's off course. It got in a storm, right? And it's just trying to
Mhm.
find an area to land in. So it has nothing to do with the course, right? It's trying to make an emergency landing somewhere, but at least it can assume that the Earth is stationary. If it sees a highway. You ever seen planes fly and land on highways? They have to do that sometimes. So it's not on course at all. It has nothing to do with being on course, but it's just in the south now compared to where it was. It had a 500 mile per hour conserved momentum when it started. That's how fast we can assume the plane was moving with the Earth because it was on the Earth. Now it needs to be going twice as fast eastward directly, right? By the time it gets to the equator, right? But it only went west southwest the whole time, right? So the idea of making corrections to make it go directly eastward twice as fast is insane. I don't know how you're expecting him to do that, and it wouldn't. And he doesn't have a course anyway, so it wouldn't happen because he's trying to stay on course. He's just getting to the south. He's trying to get there. It was in a storm. He couldn't see anything. He can't even see the ground, right? So he's getting there, and he's going to find a highway to land on. And we know he can always just assume to treat it as stationary because that plane's always going to be moving in the eastward tangential velocity, or it's just going to be landing on a stationary Earth, which makes more sense because he never did any corrections to stay on course the whole time, and the atmosphere could be blowing in whatever direction. So that's not helping him. How is the plane moving twice as fast directly eastward when it only went west southwest and it only had a 500 mile per hour conserved momentum to begin with, Bacon? Explain the dynamics.
Or should I respond to the 2-minute monologue, or should I respond to the last question you made after the monologue? I was trying to go for a back and forth here.
You could explain, you could respond to the whole thing, but what it comes down to is what's the mechanism that
Oh, you
makes them
mentioned
perfectly in sync?
things we already talked
What's the
about. I'm
mechanism
not
that
sure
makes
what to
them
respond
perfectly in
to.
sync? What's the mechanism that makes him perfectly in sync with the eastward rotation when he had no course? He was just trying to get to the south. He's not following a course, right? He's not making corrections for any course. He's just getting to the south where he has to be twice as fast sideways and landing on the Earth as if it's stationary. What makes him go twice as fast sideways with the rotation perfect?
Oh, if he's flying blindly, there's no guarantee he's going to be in the same direction that he's supposed to. So he might not be in
Oh,
sync with the
really?
Earth.
Well, that
Yeah.
would be interesting. So then by that logic, you're saying that if a plane like a jet that flies like 1,000 miles an hour and he has 40,000 pounds of thrust resistance, like a helicopter, can stay in midair and he could fly as fast as the rotation supposedly goes, then he could get off, like he could get out of sync with the Earth on purpose and just take a camera out and show that the Earth spins separately from the plane, right, as he's hovering.
How does that show that the Earth is spinning? If the Earth was
Well,
stationary
because
and
he
he did the
knows he
same,
knows.
if
Wait, they're
please,
stationary.
please, please let me finish the sentence, then respond. If the Earth was stationary and he took the exact same course, the video would look exactly the same. So how is that? How would that show that the Earth is spinning?
Well, you just said that there's no guarantee that he's going to be in sync with the eastward rotation, right?
Yeah.
So that means you're saying that the eastward rotation could be different than the plane's eastward rotation at any given time.
I would say eastward velocity. The Earth's eastward velocity
The
might be different
tangential
than the
velocity.
airplane eastward velocity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be a problem with that. You agree if it was off like even to 10 miles an hour, that if the plane wasn't moving in an
That doesn't
eastward
make it a
tangential
problem.
velocity
The
close enough that even a 10 mile an hour difference of the surface that it's landing on compared to its own eastward rotation, there would be a problem because it would break the wheels off at least, right?
No, I mean I have on the screen an example where it's not a problem. So the eastward velocity of the airplane is 177 miles slower than the surface. So it's not in sync with the surface. Yet it lands at 250 miles per hour exactly with the road with the landing strip.
No, no,
You
no,
don't
no,
have
no.
to be in sync with the
Listen,
Earth. It would
your
only
your
have to be.
drawing failed already. You can't say it's going 823 miles an hour sideways with a rotation. Where'd you get that?
I already answered that.
There's
But
no
that's not what we're
course.
talking about.
There's
Please,
no course he's following. How does he go at 823 miles an hour sideways now?
that's the eastward velocity.
So is the pilot aware that the plane's going 823 miles an hour sideways? Is the pilot aware of that at all?
The pilot doesn't have a reading of the velocity of the airplane in a non-inertial frame.
Why? So wouldn't that be dangerous?
Why?
Well, because if it was off from the eastward tangential velocity of the Earth, and he's assuming that he's just going to land on it as if it's stationary, he would need to go. He would need to know for sure how fast he's going sideways.
No, all he needs to know is his velocity relative to the Earth's surface. In that case, that's
Relative to the
250
moving
miles an
surface.
hour.
Wait, relative to the moving surface?
No, relative to the surface, I said. Regardless
Oh,
of
the
where
surface. That's
it's moving.
stationary surface. You mean stationary surface when you say that, right?
No, I didn't mean stationary or moving. In
Oh,
both
okay. Well, then,
scenarios, all he needs to be is to. All he needs is to be 250 miles relative to the landing strip in the same direction.
no. It would make a difference. If the Earth were moving, he would be either relative to the moving surface or relative to the stationary surface, because those would be two different readings completely.
Oh, there's just one surface.
Yeah,
That's the
and
Earth.
it's just stationary, and it's always stationary. That's what the plane is always measuring it as if it's stationary relative to its own movements, right?
Oh, in my screen here, it's not. The surface is moving eastwards 1,000 miles an hour. The airplane is
Right.
moving eastward to 823 miles per hour, so not in sync with the surface. Yet it would land
Okay.
at 250 miles per hour, along with the landing strip.
In a different in a perpendicular sideways direction.
At a 45-degree angle. Yeah.
Why? So where did it get the extra? Even though that doesn't work already, how would it get the extra to be 1,000 again?
What do you mean? The extra to get 1,000?
Yeah, well, it's only
I'm not really sure.
823. Its eastward tangential velocity is 823, and you're saying that the difference of 100, whatever
77.
the difference of 1,000, right? Yeah, so the difference right there, 177
Mhm.
miles per hour extra sideways tangentially. How does it, like, this doesn't work already. Just keep that in mind. But if it did work
Why
this
not?
way, how is he making up the extra when he's landing? I just want to make
We've
sure I
spent
can get your
literally
concept.
hours explaining this to you in your perspective.
Oh, come on.
Me
You're
too.
lost.
Ruf,
That's
you're not going to just ride. You're not going to ride on Bacon's coattails on a theory that still doesn't even work, bro. Don't just come in and act like we've told you how this works. Explain to me how you get the extra 177 at least.
Right.
Where's
You
that
turn
come
left.
from? The Eastern Zone? No,
Right.
Ruf, I'd rather not talk to you. I'm talking to
Okay.
Bacon. I want to keep this one-on-one, please. Bacon,
what?
where's the extra 177,000 mile eastward tangential velocity come with this scenario that doesn't work already?
It's 177 or 177,000. There's no extra. All the
177,
velocities.
177 compared to the 1,000 he needs. He needs an extra 177 to be going eastward tangentially, exactly at 1,000 miles an hour to keep up with the rotation.
He,
In this
he doesn't
scenario that
need
I
any
don't think
extra.
works already.
He doesn't need any extra velocity.
Okay,
I
why
don't
not?
know where you're getting that from.
I was in the store when you were explaining, but maybe I don't know. What was it? He needs to be moving
Eh,
with the Earth at 1,000 miles an hour eastward, right?
No.
How does he land then?
Diagonally at 250 miles relative to the surface, which is 823 miles eastwards and 177 miles southwards.
Oh, so you're just going to vector math it and then say that's one movement?
Yeah, that's how vectors work. You have an x and
Yeah,
y
but it's not
component.
moving eastward. It's not moving eastward. It only had 500 miles per hour conserved momentum to begin with.
No, it accelerated due to its course. Now it has 823 miles per hour in the eastward direction.
Well, that's a concept. I mean, but the pilot's not aware of it. There's no proof of that. There's no dynamics. Obviously, if he's moving 823 miles an hour eastward compared to his original movement, which he was
Yeah,
unaware of as well, by the way, how is he
I'm not
not
trying
aware that he's accelerated to 823 miles an hour sideways? Why would
because
that be
he's
even
navigating.
possible, or even probable
Because
or
he's too.
plausible?
Yeah, because the two reference he has for the navigation of the airplane is the air and the land. That's why.
Right, but the land is he's never talking about the land as if it's moving, right?
Okay. It does not
Right.
have to
So it's
talk
always a
about it as if
stationary
it's
ground,
moving.
right?
He's simply trying to get to the landing
He's
strip.
always the concept of the Earth is stationary, right? So if he's moving 823 miles an hour sideways, and the Earth is just stationary, why would he be moving 823 miles an hour sideways?
That wouldn't happen on stationary Earth. This example is from a rotating Earth, in which the velocity is 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, which is where
Right,
he's
but
landing.
you don't. Okay, first of all, objectively, can you at least agree that if the plane, like say, is taking off from the North Pole, even if the plane were having to be going tangentially eastward 1,000 miles an hour and only had a cruising speed of 400 miles an hour, like I was talking about with Daza, do you think that the pilot wouldn't be aware that the plane is now accelerated to 1,000 miles an hour from zero by the time it gets there?
Correct, because the cruising speed is relative to the air and the surface. The 1,000 miles
I know.
per hour is relative to inertial frame, which the pilot doesn't have access to.
What the problem is, I'm talking about just be like real for a second. Forget about your mathematical idea that this might work still. Do you think that the pilot would not be aware that the plane is now moving eastward tangentially 1,000 miles an hour when he only accelerated at 400 forward?
Correct, because that 1,000 miles per hour is on a frame that is not rotating with the Earth, a frame that he doesn't have access to.
I'm not asking for your explanation. I'm asking if he didn't have access to that, then what would be the sense in the pilot not being made aware that his plane is physically now moving 1,000 miles an hour? Planes usually aren't even made to go that fast. In fact,
I'm not sure there was a question there.
I'm saying, can you just be like, oh, that does kind of like, make a
You want
little
me to
bit of
just
like
agree with
trouble in
you?
your mind
Sorry,
with the
no.
idea that the pilot's not aware that he's moving this fast, faster than he ever even accelerated forward, over twice as fast the amount that he accelerated forward. We assume that he's moving eastward in this tangential velocity, right? We assume it because we have a kinematic concept that that's happening. There's no dynamics to it, and there's no awareness on the pilot's part. That's my point. And there's no mechanism that's making him do that. Saying corrections doesn't work. Corrections and
Was that
a little bit
supposed to be a
left and a little bit
question?
right when you only have a cruising speed of 400 miles an hour in one vector forwards, right? In this west-southwest direction from the North Pole all the way to the equator. If you're only going to be correcting a little bit to stay, even if he's staying on course, this little bit of corrections when the winds are blowing in all directions isn't going to automatically make the plane go eastward 1,000 miles faster than where he started from. You get that doesn't work, right?
No, I
Or
don't
otherwise,
get
you have
that.
to actually name a mechanism that made it do that. What's the mechanism that makes it go 1,000 miles an hour from zero to 1,000 sideways when he only had a cruising speed of 400 forward? What's the mechanism that made that happen without the pilot's awareness?
It's the combination of all the acceleration that the airplane experienced during its course.
But if it was like only 500, right? Somehow, like that, that acceleration was only 500, it'd be a big problem. He would be 500 miles per hour out of sync with the Earth, right?
It's not just to 500.
Yeah, it'd be up to 1,000, right? But that it makes no
That's
sense
correct.
because there's no mechanism. Correcting for the course
What do you
doesn't
mean
help
there's
you.
no mechanism? I just
Correcting for the
mentioned it.
course doesn't make him go 1,000 miles an hour sideways, bacon. Get real.
It does on a rotating Earth because the course is relative to the
Why?
Earth's surface. Because the course is
Just
relative
because
to Earth's
you think
surface.
of it as relative, just because the course, no, he has no course. He's lost. Remember, he's blindly going to the equator. He's lost. He's in a storm. He has no course. He's just going there and landing as if it's stationary. How
Well,
is
if
the
he's
plane moving
blind, he's
1,000 miles an
probably
hour?
not gonna get to the equator.
No, he's blind in the air, right? He can still fly the plane, but the storm has made him completely off course. The air control station is down, right? These are emergency situations that every pilot would be trained to deal with, right? He doesn't have any course. He's just going to get to the equator. And he needs to be going 1,000 miles an hour to be in tangential sync with the Earth. How would that happen?
Okay, let's say the right engine is slightly has slightly more thrust than the left engine. What do you think is gonna happen?
It's going to veer.
Hmm.
Going to have to overcompensate.
No, he doesn't know that. He's flying blindly. He doesn't know that the thrusts are not exactly balanced.
Well, he could.
Well, he could because
So
he could
he
even
knows.
had a course because he would
We're
know.
talking about the dynamics. We're talking about a pilot knows the feel of the plane. He knows his feel. He would know
No,
if he's
no, no.
going 1,000 miles an hour sideways. He has a
He
good.
knows that.
He's been in the air many years. He knows if he accelerates to 400 miles an hour, what it feels like to accelerate to 400 miles an hour. He has that
Please, let
feeling,
me
even though you can't
please
completely feel every plane's movement. He
let me
knows what it
respond to
feels
the
like to go
first
forward.
claim.
But if he was going 1,000 miles an hour sideways, not only would he feel it, he would know it, and he would have to do it on purpose.
Okay, let me respond to the first claim before you make like a list of other 10. So you just said that he'll know he's accelerating up to 1,000 miles per hour. No, he doesn't have
Even
any. They have no instrument that reads the airplane speed relative to inertial frame. All he
right.
has are instruments that measure the airplane speed relative to the air, and relative to the references on the ground, like radar and that kind of
For
stuff.
this
He
emergency,
doesn't.
but you pointed out
All
yourself,
those
if
things
like
are
if he
rotating
wasn't
around the
following
Earth.
a ground path, he's following blind. There's a chance he could be out of sync with that tangential velocity. These are the emergency type of things
Yeah,
that you
but
would need to
I,
know.
I just mentioned I just mentioned another thing that would make him out of sync, and all you addressed that the airplane the pilot would know that. That's not true. It happens on if the thrusts are not actually balanced. The way you know that is the airplane's getting off course. So, but if he's flying blindly, he has no idea of the course that the airplane's taking. He
Well,
has
no,
no
he knows
idea
he's
those
going
things are
south.
taking place.
He
How
knows he's
does he
going
know
south.
that?
Well, there's mechanisms to know for him to know he's going. He could be looking at a star. He decided to use the stars because he
So
knows
he
that
has a
that star's
course
on the
now.
south.
So he has a
Well,
course now
he just
because
knows that
if
that
there's
general
any,
direction is south. The general
please,
direction he's going in is south because he knows the stars. That's all.
please, if he's just slightly now deviating to the right, and he noticed the let's say the star that should be due south is actually not due south, he's gonna correct for that. So now you're giving me back the mechanism that I need.
No, I'm just saying he knows the stars and he knows he's generally headed south, but he doesn't have any kind of course correction or anything. He's just trying to get
Correct.
to the
If
south.
if any effect, uh, Coriolis or wind or whatever, if any effect, then takes him off course or starts to give him a sideways velocity relative to the wind, he's gonna have to correct for that. Otherwise, he's not gonna make it to the equator.
Well, regardless, though, Bacon, it still doesn't work. I don't know why I'd say by making an example of something that's going to make him veer off course, like the winds, or whatever. It doesn't matter because you have to have a mechanism, dude. You can't just say the plane is thought to be 823 miles an hour sideways. It has to be an actual mechanism that does that. And he's not doing it by staying on course because he could be going only 200 miles an hour cruising speed or 400
Okay,
miles an hour
let's
cruising speed. And either
let's
way,
say
you're saying he's going 823 miles an hour sideways, whether he's going 400 or 200 forward. So how are you saying he's going 800 sideways no matter how fast he's going forward?
I'm not saying he's going 800 miles an hour no matter how fast he's going forward. Let's
Well, you have
simplify
to
our
be to have
scenario.
for
Let,
your
let me let
equation
me
to work
take
out.
let me take out every single effect ordered during Coriolis. Let's start at 60 north, going towards the equator. So
Okay,
the
that's
velocity
500
at
miles an
60
hour.
north, sorry, 30 north. So the velocity at 30 degrees north, that's 500 miles an hour. And
Okay.
he wants to go to the equator. There's zero
Yep.
wind, and airplane, all the thrusts are perfectly symmetrical. He just aims at due south and just goes, right?
Okay.
No wind, no anything. So on if the Earth was rotating, if there was Coriolis, then he's going to start to have a velocity relative to the surface in the
Right.
westwards direction, right? So he's going to starts to drift in the
Right.
westwards direction. If
Right.
there's no wind, now
Well,
he's
he's
going.
not technically. Wait, hold on. Wait. Okay, technically, if there's no wind or anything like that, he's not actually veering. It's just the Earth moving underneath him that
That's right.
makes it
That's
look
right.
like a westward movement. Right. That's the
That's right.
Coriolis effect. Right.
That's right. So now there's a difference in the eastward velocity between the airplane and the air. The air is faster in the eastward velocity than the airplane. That difference is going to blow
Well,
the airplane eastwards because there's a
yeah, but
difference in the eastward velocity between them.
no, no, it doesn't work that way. Winds go in all directions.
No, no, no. In this case, there's no wind. Remember, zero wind. The airplane is
Oh, so
trying to
you're
go.
thinking. So you're okay, but you're thinking because when there's no wind, it's in perfect sync, which would cause wind when the plane's not in
Yeah,
sync.
that's obvious.
conceptually that would have to happen, but obviously they don't have that happen. That would be
What do you
something
mean?
that you would know for sure
But
because they
that
don't they don't have
somebody.
a stronger headwind because they're going eastward. I mean westward. Planes don't say, "Oh, I'm going westward against the spin, so I got all this air blowing me backwards."
Yeah, if you would work out how much eastward wind the airplane would get, That's like much less than the threshold of regular wind against an airplane. So you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between it wind because he's deviating due to Coriolis or just regular wind.
But you would be able to tell the difference because when you get to the equator, if you're 100 miles an hour off, or
We
200
didn't.
miles an hour off, or even 5 miles an hour off, you're going to see the Earth moving separately from your plane backwards.
No, but you're now ignoring the effect I just mentioned that would happen through
No,
the whole course. You're just teleporting you to the equator.
but even if it did work that way, which I'll still argue it wouldn't work that way, are you saying that the pilot is putting his faith that the wind is going to push his plane back and the eastward tangential velocity sink? That's how the
No,
pilots they're just putting their faith in the wind.
no. I'm saying if
Oh,
he
what are
goes
they doing then?
due south, if he goes due south,
Yeah,
and there's no wind, and there's there's perfect symmetry in the air in the aircraft, and he
no
starts
wind
to
for the plane.
deviate. No wind for Earth. There's no
Oh,
wind in
but
the
there's wind
atmosphere.
for the plane. So you're saying that the wind for the plane would only
Obviously,
be one direction. If there was no wind, there would only be wind in one direction for the plane.
yeah, the airplane measures its velocity relative to the atmosphere, right? That's how it measures the wind. That's the wind
Right,
against
but
the airplane.
dude,
Okay, so
there would
if
be
there's
if
no
the ground
wind
were
for
moving, there
ground,
would have. If the ground were moving, he wouldn't be able to. His ground speed would be totally a different thing because he'd be measuring his own speed towards the equator, and he would have to know how fast the tangential velocity is at the equator. Because if there was any chance that he'd be out of sync eastward, that would be a problem. And there's no measurement of that and no awareness on the pilot's part. So therefore, right there, we know the Earth isn't moving. Or there'd be emergency measures to make sure that this never happens.
that doesn't make sense. Like we were getting to exactly the reason why you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Because
Even
you're saying the
assuming a
winds.
scenario.
You're saying the winds are going to blow him faster eastward.
No, no. Assuming no wind. When I say it's going to
Okay.
blow him, that's the just wind relative to the airplane, because the airplane is now have a different eastward velocity than the air, which means the air is not in sync with the airplane. So there's eastwards wind.
Okay.
So
So
it's
then
gonna blow the airplane
what's
towards
making the
east.
plane twice as fast? What's
Hmm?
blowing the plane twice as fast if it's not a wind?
Oh, it's not blowing twice as fast at any particular moment,
No, the
but it's
plane has to
blowing
be going twice
eastward.
as fast eastward. The plane has to be going tangentially twice as fast as where it started out from
Yeah,
when
but
it gets there.
this is it has to get twice as fast as an end result at the end of the full course. As soon as it moves, as soon as it take off from 30 degrees north, it's gonna have a different velocity than the atmosphere. That's gonna be perceived as eastwards wind. And that's gonna add up to the eastward velocity. Of course, it's not gonna add up to 1,000 miles per hour immediately, but it's gonna constantly add up to that. I don't think it's going to reach 1,000 miles per hour. So I think if an airplane there's no zero wind and the aircraft is perfectly symmetrical, it just goes due south. I don't think he would actually sink with the Earth's surface. But it wouldn't simply maintain the 500 miles per hour because that's ignoring the effects of the atmosphere. It's ignoring that the air is going to start blowing the airplane as soon as it's out of sync with the atmosphere.
Right. Okay, so that in that scenario, you're saying he puts the faith in the atmosphere wind to move him sideways faster.
There's no pulling face. I'm not sure where you're getting this from.
Well, I mean, if he's just flying to the south without a course, and he's just going to get there and land wherever he wants, right? He knows he's headed there. He's dead reckoning, right? He knows he's going
Hmm?
to the south, right? He's not worried about any kind of rotation, but he knows he's going to land on the Earth as if it's stationary. What's going to make him go twice as fast eastward?
I'm sorry, got distracted. Say that again.
He's just dead reckoning straight to the equator, right?
Dead reckoning?
Yeah, like say he has a star when he starts off, right?
That's
Just
not
going to
dead reckoning.
follow that southward star, right? He's gonna take into account the star moving 15 degrees an hour, and he's gonna know that he's dead reckoning for the city that he was. He knows the city that he's gonna prove the eastward rotation. In fact, he knows the city that he's headed for, right?
I think not dead
Would be
reckoning.
directly south. Would be directly south of where he started from, right? So now he's gonna head straight south. He's gonna go there, but somehow he's gonna be moving eastward twice as fast, but he went in one straight line south to where the city would have been, but it's not going to be there because of the rotation. He's trying to prove the concept, right? Prove that the Earth moved. Now, if the city's there, then we know that there's no rotation because he just went dead reckoning straight there, where he would have to veer left to keep up with the city that's moving faster than he was when he started out with. If he's not veering left to keep up with that city, then there's no movement of the Earth. He's got a star that he's focused on. He's moving dead reckoning. He's going to stay in that line with that star, and he's not going to move south. He's not going to move east or west at all. He's going straight to the equator. Right? He's not going to allow the plane. He's going to correct for anything that blows on the plane. Now, when he gets to the equator, how do we know that he's moving twice as fast sideways to keep up with the tangential velocity of the Earth so he can land as if it's stationary? What's the mechanism that would make that happen?
Do you understand that the air is moving with the Earth?
Well, I'd rather just talk to Bacon. This is a one-on-one. I'm not talking to you tonight, Don.
But he's offered
I'm not talking
for
to you.
me
I'm not talking to you, Don. We've already gone through all the scenarios. Please don't make it a longer conversation that everybody else has to listen to.
Doesn't mean
I'm not going to talk to you. I know about the air supposedly moving with the Earth, but I got Bacon right where I want him. Bacon, what's the answer? He's dead reckoning.
He said I can
the
take
place
over.
in the south. No. Said I'm out. Bacon,
Okay.
you gave up? You gave up, Bacon?
No,
You don't have an answer?
I'm here.
He's going
here.
dead reckoning.
No, you
He's
said I
dead
can give
reckoning,
it a
right?
go.
Dead reckoning from the beginning to the end of the flight. He's dead reckoning to the South Star that he knows is right in line with where he wants to land.
I don't think you
plane needs
know
to be
that
going
reckoning is,
twice
but I
as
think I
fast.
get what you mean with that.
Yeah, he's going directly south. And he's going to maintain his direct southward position by looking at the star in front of him and keeping on course with that. Even though it's 15 degrees movement of the star, he's going to keep that in mind. He's going to go directly south, right? Now, he needs to be going twice as fast sideways, we agreed on, to keep up with the tangential velocity because he only started with 500 miles an hour. What makes it so that the pilot doesn't have to worry about any of that? He can just always land as if it's stationary. How is that at all possible for the pilot to not realize that the plane accelerated twice as fast sideways by the time he got there? And what would be doing that? What's the mechanism that makes that happen?
Well, as I was explaining you, as soon as he take off, he gets to a latitude. Sorry, he gets to a latitude where the ground is moving faster than he was. The atmosphere is also moving faster than he was. So if we assume he simply continues on that velocity and doesn't gain the necessary sideways velocity, he's going to experience winds towards that direction because the atmosphere is moving faster than he is. That's going to be perceived as a wind blowing him eastwards. So he would have to.
But then when I said he puts his faith in the winds, you said no, he doesn't have to do that.
That's not putting faith on the wind. That's what I'm telling you would happen on a rotating Earth. That's not the airplane having faith that that's going to happen.
Well, no, but I mean, he needs to have faith that he's going to be in perfect tangential velocity in sync with the eastward rotation, so he can assume to treat the Earth as stationary. What's going to make him, in his mind, if he thinks about it like this is happening, and he doesn't think about it like most pilots are just trained to treat it as stationary and not worry about the movement or the curvature, right? So how can a pilot just not even worry about the movement of the curvature and just fly there and land? What is he putting his faith in to make sure that he's going to keep up with this eastward rotation? What if he's worried about being out of sync when he's there? What's he putting his faith in?
It doesn't matter what he's worried about. The fact is, if he, for some reason, manages to keep the eastward velocity he had, he's gonna get increasingly faster winds blowing him towards the eastward direction. So either he aims the airplane a little more to the left and eventually syncs up with the atmosphere and stops getting that much of sideways wind, or he's simply not going to be able to fly the airplane.
No,
you know the airplane has to fly.
Like if you're talking to a brand new pilot, right? He's just always assumed it's stationary, and then he's realized that there would be a tangential difference, right? And now he's talked to me or somebody like me, and he's all worried that he's going to be out of sync with the Earth. What are you going to tell that pilot to make him feel like it's safe just to fly there and not worry about your course? Follow that star, get down to the south, wherever, find a place to land, wherever you want to land when you get there, you'll be fine. How are you going to guarantee that he's going to be okay with doing that if he thinks that there's going to be a eastward tangential velocity of 500 miles an hour he has to make up.
I don't have to anticipate that. The fact that
Well, I'm just asking. It's just a thought experiment. How would you explain to that pilot that he should put his faith in this and not worry about anything? He'll be fine. What should he put his faith in?
oh, 1 second, give me a minute here. I'll be right back.
Just a thought experiment, but you definitely don't want me to answer.
No, I don't want you to answer because you don't know anything about the Earth or the movements or any models. You don't know anything, Don. Just stick to like
It's
regular
me not
talk.
knowing stuff that gets you
You don't
triggered.
know
That
stuff,
must be
right?
it.
Yeah, that's it. Pretty much. You act like you know stuff and you don't actually know stuff.
I had to leave for a minute.
Okay.
Okay,
So
you
what
were
are
asking.
you going to tell this pilot to put his faith in to make sure that he's safe to just go down there and don't worry about your eastward tangential velocity? It's going to be twice as fast by the time you get there. What's the mechanism you're going to explain to him does that for the plane to be in sync with the Earth?
The same that I've been explaining to you for the past 2 hours.
Okay, just do it. Say it to him. You're a new pilot. You're just explaining to him. He doesn't need a course.
No,
He's
he's
just going
already
to fly to
said
the
it.
south and be able to
He
land.
doesn't have to tell
There's
the
nothing
pilot.
to worry about. He's going to follow that star. Whatever city's below him, he's going to find a place to land in that city. How are you going to make sure that he's okay to do that?
He's
What are you
already
going to tell
said
him?
you don't have to.
What
Yeah,
makes
I don't have to explain
Don? I don't need
anything
your help.
unless
He
he's
wants
like,
to know.
well,
He's talked to me and he's like, wait, I got to be moving twice as fast by the time I get there sideways. What's going to make my plane do that?
He's not spoke to you.
So just explain it to him as if I were him.
okay,
Everything will be fine, mate. Just fly the plane.
even if for some reason you manage to keep your tangential velocity intact, as you get closer and closer to the
Which wouldn't
equator,
work anyway. Yeah, like even if you managed to keep the 500 original from being on the ground, is what you're saying?
yes, even if that happened,
Okay.
as you
Yeah,
get
even if
closer
that
and closer to the equator,
Uh-huh.
you're going to experience stronger winds blowing you eastwards. So that's going
Uh-huh.
to accelerate you towards the eastward anyway.
Okay. So you're saying put your faith in the winds. That's what I said. You're telling him to put his faith in the winds.
That's not
The winds will
that's not
blow you
putting your
twice as
faith.
fast
That's
sideways.
what
Don't
would
worry.
happen on a rotating globe. That's not putting your faith on it. That's what would happen on a rotating Earth.
Yeah, it's
But
more
if
like
you expect
Yeah,
flying
but I mean,
normally.
he has to depend. He has to think of the
That's
air
not
moving
faith.
him twice as fast sideways.
No, it doesn't.
Or it could just be stationary and he just lands when he gets there because it's stationary. Or he has to think about
No.
the winds actually pushing him twice as fast sideways. Right? Is that what you're saying?
None of that.
That's what he said.
No, I listened to him.
Well, it's just the concept that the air is going to move him twice as fast sideways, but no pilot would ever put the faith in winds moving him sideways.
You don't have to. You just fly normally and you go around Earth.
Yeah, because it's not moving. That's how you don't have to.
In
You
your
would have
mind.
to if it were moving. It's not in my mind. No, if it were moving, you would have to have your faith in something because you're going to be
No.
moving twice as fast sideways. Let's say the pilot only flies there at 200 miles an hour rather than 400. How are you explaining that the pilot's going to be moving 1,000 miles an hour no matter how fast he goes forward?
You
By the
keep
time he
saying
gets there, he's going to be moving twice as fast sideways.
It's not even true
Yeah.
except in relativity.
Don, we don't need your help. Are you giving up, Bacon?
You're not
Because if you're
aware.
giving up, I'm not talking to Don about this because he doesn't know what he's talking about. We already established 500. Bacon agreed. He started with that conserve momentum. Then he said that if he's going to the equator, he'd have to be going 1,000 eastward, which should be
Bacon's
sideways.
been humoring you in terms of relativity.
What?
Did you hear me?
He's been humoring me because it all has to do with relativity.
Yes.
Well, then you don't even know what Bacon's thinking. Why are you trying to talk for him?
So I listened to him for the last half an hour since I got
Did
up.
you give up, Bacon? Did you give up? I want to hear.
Oh, I'll have to because it's 4 a.m. here. I should be
Okay,
going
so
to
you
bed.
give up. You're saying that the winds are going to move him is your only answer. The winds push him.
That wasn't my
twice
that was my
as fast.
last answer. That was my only answer.
Well, yeah, you're saying the winds would have to be. You have to tell the pilot the winds are going to be moving you eastward, even though there's winds moving in all directions.
There's wind moving on, going all direction, but they're not 1,000 miles an hour wind, right? So if you maintain if you
But
maintain
something's
the
got to
wind
move him exactly twice as fast sideways. Some wind has got to move him without him even knowing it twice as fast sideways, which is ridiculous, by the way. But that doesn't happen, and we would know if there's a wind that strong moving him twice as fast sideways. That would be
that's not
identifiable.
some
The
wind.
pilot would know that. The pilot would know that. He'd put his faith in it, and he'd be like, "Oh, great! I'm glad that wind happened. Otherwise, I'd be out of sync with the Earth." You get my
That's
point.
that's not some wind. That wind is just how he perceives his airplane not having the same tangential velocity as the atmosphere. That's not a specific wind. Like if the
So if you're
airplane
saying
wasn't
that, okay,
flying,
so he's flying through an area where he knows there's no wind, right? And he's like, "Oh, but I got a sideways wind. That must mean I'm out of sync with the atmosphere." There's no pilot ever thinks about it that way. The pilot just
yes,
just flies
because
point to point. He never thinks about
yeah,
the Earth moving. He never accounts for the Earth moving. The wind never accounts for it because the Earth isn't freaking moving. That's the only way it would work, Bacon.
yeah, they would never have to think about it like that because, as I said before, this actually happens continuously. So you never get to a point where you have your initial velocity preserved, and you start to feeling this huge wind. You never get to that point because that's already happening gradually the whole time.
No, we would see that. We would have that. That would be in the books, dude. We'd be like, look, when and
No,
every
because
pilot
that's
course, they would be like, now you know if there's no wind because you have just an eastward wind that's accelerating your plane twice as fast. And good thing for that. Otherwise, you're going to be out of sync with the Earth when you're trying to treat it as stationary when you land. Good thing we have faith in the wind moving one direction. That's
You're repeating
insane
yourself.
and ridiculous and false.
it's a straw man.
It's stationary.
It's,
The only way he
it's
can land is if it's
misrepresentation of what I
stationary.
said.
Be sure that he can land is if it's stationary with a different tangential velocity is if it's actually stationary. What would be the difference in how you would train a pilot to treat the Earth? This is a closing question, so you can go. What would be the difference in how you would train a pilot to fly over a stationary Earth as opposed to a spinning ball Earth, Bacon? How would you train the
None.
pilot different?
That's my
None.
argument.
That's the answer I
That's our
wanted. That's the
argument.
answer I wanted.
Yeah, I'm agreeing.
That's
None.
the answer I wanted, and that's what you have to argue, and it makes you look ridiculous.
And
Because
that
there'd be so
means
many
you
No,
have no
dynamical
argument.
differences. The dynamics would be completely different, which we just went through for 3 hours
So you've
or 2
misunderstood the
hours,
globe
whatever.
again.
No,
we
because it's
went
just like a
through what
stationary
you
flat Earth.
presented
If the
that
if the
argument.
globe is the exact same as a stationary flat Earth, then
We're
why are we
flying
even arguing?
planes. It's similar, yeah.
When you fly a plane, it's just a stationary flat Earth. But if you want to think about it as a globe, you can.
Yes.
That's like everything else. We could think of it as a ball, but there's no curvature and
You
there's
can.
everything's just level and
Yes.
stationary. But you could
Yes.
think of it as the model with the ball going around the Earth or geocentric turning Earth, but none of that matters. Full circle here,
As,
Bacon.
No,
If you
as long
could
as
if
you
you could
get
get rid of the movement problem, if you could say, look, the
right.
reason we train pilots to fly as if it's stationary is it's actually stationary. Now they don't dip the nose down because of the gravity. You'd be free of that problem if you just give up the rotation with your
As
geocentric
long as
Earth.
you get that
You
there's
wouldn't
no
have to
issue
worry
with
about people like me
plane.
coming up and calling bullshit.
As long as you get the
I know,
plane still
I,
work, that's all that matters.
So are you
I
done,
know you
Bacon?
I know you disagree with
Are you
that,
done?
but you didn't actually provide a good reason for why there should be a difference in training between a rotating Earth and a stationary Earth.
Well, because like what if he gets off course and he's flying if he's not he's out of sync with the eastward tangential velocity, that would be one of the problems, right?
That could
You don't
happen
get out of
regardless
sync.
on Earth spinning or not.
What?
You don't get
That
out
could
of sync.
happen regardless on whether Earth is spinning. Like in the
No.
example,
I'm talking about the spinning of the Earth, the tangential velocity of the spinning Earth compared to the tangential velocity eastward of the plane in motion. That's the difference I'm talking about.
yeah, as I'm saying,
And those aren't
the airplane,
always automatically in sync because of winds.
In
as I'm,
lockstep, mate. That's what they call it.
You could
as I
think
was
of it,
saying,
but it wouldn't be so perfectly in sync that you could just train the pilot and never worry about it.
Oh well.
And even on top of that, even if the winds did blow the plane twice as fast sideways,
They
that's an
don't.
extra 500 miles an hour that the wind's got to carry the plane as it's landing in some perpendicular backward sideways direction.
Yeah, that doesn't happen
Yeah, because it's stationary, Don. That's why it doesn't happen.
because the atmosphere moves with Earth.
Doesn't it? Yeah, so your atmosphere is pushing the plane twice as fast sideways as it's
No,
landing at an
never,
angle that's backwards and sideways to the
never.
rotation. Back to that. Yeah, never, because it's stationary, Don. It's the only way it could work. And